Well, hello there. Good to see you all. Today, we're going to be filming another episode of the Bionicle Inspiration Series, and today I wanted this episode to be all about Toa. Now, I've done Toa episodes in the past, and I kind of like doing Toa episodes, because it's a bit of a theme that encompasses quite a lot of different things, and it's also good time for me to put some submissions into episodes as well. So we got a couple submitted mocks today, but we've also just got some cool mocks that we found online that I think are some really cool Toa mocks that are playing with some concepts in some really unique and different ways. So without further ado, let us begin and talk about some Toa mocks. So if you're planning to make your own Toa, hopefully some of these can give you some ideas. Let's move on to the first Toa mock we've got today. It's by Bob the Doctor 27 and it's called Toa Erythra. So first off, really like the mask design on this. I think it's so lovely just to see a lovely custom mask like that. So most likely, I don't think it says anything in the description about this. It does not. Well, it says that he wears the RSG Mask of Stone. I don't know what RSG would stand for, but this very much looks like I said, a 3D printed mask. I'll put a link in the description to a Shapeways marketplace where you can buy quite a variety of different 3D printed masks or elements or things, like some cool hand designs, some cool like reimagined pieces, or just some really awesome looking masks that are very kind of akin to this mock's mask here. I assume RSG might be a person who sells them. Really should have looked into that before I started the episode. In fact, I'm gonna pause and look into it now. Okay, so I did the thing. Turns out these are from the Shapeways store, Red Star Forge. Red Star Forge does a lot of really awesome stuff and actually makes quite a large variety of really cool 3D printed masks and other different things as well. So I'll also put a link to their Shapeways store in the description below. So if you're like, man, this mask is super, super cool, that's the way to look it up. So there's no reason you couldn't grab one yourself. Additionally, in some of the research that I was doing very briefly there, I also found out that this mask is an actual mask. It's on the Bionicle wiki. I can put that in. The mask is the exact same one here. And it sort of says that some of its powers essentially just grants the user elemental power over stone. So I think it's kind of this cool idea that like you could be a Toa of fire, but you're like, I have this mask, so I can have very, very brief elemental powers over stone. I kind of like that idea. I think it's really clever and cool and just an interesting way of kind of incorporating just elements of the Bionicle story and playing with those sorts of concepts and putting it into a cool mask design. I like that. It also says that Toa Erythra here is also an official Bionicle character, which, hey, I didn't know that. So really cool that Bob the Doctor is giving this character some life, because it looks really cool. My final thought on this really cool custom mask is that when I was building some system little vignettes recently, I put in some just some really solid, really nice minifigures that came in some more modern sets. And they were just, I don't know, really, really good minifigures. For example, like, the Lando minifigure that you get in the Solo A Star Wars Story Millennium Falcon is a really solid minifigure, And that can be the case with a whole bunch of good minifigures. But I always like being able to kind of finish off a little Star Wars vignette or any kind of vignette with a really, really solid minifigure, just because there's something nice about it that kind of completes it a little bit more. And it's just nice to put a little nice work of art that is a really solid minifigure onto a work of art that you're creating yourself, So seeing this custom mask here, I think that's always something to kind of keep in mind, putting in one little detail like that, a really solid custom 3D printed mask, or heck, even just a really pretty mask that you have in your collection, that can kind of be the little finishing touch, the cherry on the cake, that can really heighten the mock, bring it to a new level, or just give it that little extra bit of cool factor. So I don't know. I really like seeing custom masks on mocks here because it really takes it to a new area, really makes it look super cool, really unique, really different, really special. So I like that. Something else that I really like about this mock is the fact that he has a fishing rod. That's really, really cool. I love how in some of these images it looks so dynamic, the way that he's really sort of casting out that fishing rod there, getting ready to catch fish with it. It looks so dynamic, just the sort of natural kind of line that it creates has this very sort of free-flowing, smooth, sort of very swift forward movement to it. It almost looks like he's kind of like slashing a sword around or something to some degree. It kind of has that same energy, And so I love the fact that this mock doesn't have any sort of traditional weapon. He's actually just casting a fishing rod, getting ready to have some dinner, catch some fish that'll cook later, But it still says a lot about the character. It still looks really dynamic, really unique, really different, and it's just special, you know? So from the really cool mask to this really, really unique fishing rod that isn't super difficult to make yourself, this mock has this really unique personal touch. Final thing I'll talk about on this mock here is the inclusion of a little bit of shoulder detail here. So you can see that the shoulder design here, or kind of just in general, the upper arm design, it uses more sort of prefab elements there. Just a very sort of typical CCBS bone in grey, dark grey to be precise. And then you use one of the smaller Hero Factory shell pieces, and attached into the kind of lightsaber rod style hole that's in the Hero Factory shell is a 1x2 Lego plate that has this sort of bar kind of sticking out the middle of it. And then he's put a cool little black piece on the top of that there, and then sort of slid that in ever so nicely. And it really creates just a little sort of ornate finishing on the top of the sort of shoulder there. Really, really cool, really unique, really different. And honestly, you know, it's a very, very subtle detail, but I think it goes a long way, you know? I like that a lot. Little subtle thing you yourself could easily do if you want to add a little additional touch to your mock. Really like that. So that's it for Bob the Doctor's awesome Toa mock there. A bit of a smaller Toa, but hey, you know, size matters not, as Yoda once said. Let's move on to another mock here. This is a submitted mock by Palaven Miniatures. And this mock here, did he give it a name? It is his self-mock Sindri, as it is called. So I like this a lot. I don't know. I spoke about that fishing rod weapon before, and I thought that looked really cool, but hey, nothing wrong with a traditional weapon as well. A big old battle axe here makes this guy look super cool, and I love a good axe. It's always nice to see a solid axe design on a Bionicle mock, because, you know, your sword is cool, but axes are just as cool. It's not something you see every day on a mock, so a nice, distinct pleasure to see it here for sure. I also like the inclusion of some of the little kind of tan highlights on this mock. They're kind of just blocked out to be on the sort of base of the legs and the base of the arms, which I quite like. You know, it's just a nice little way of introducing a more sort of exciting, unique color, which is tan there, you know. You don't really see tan being used all that much, to be honest. I mean, it's not a color we have a lot of Bionicle pieces in, you know. The most you can really get tan elements is from that General Grievous set, which is a fantastic set. But I don't know, I always just like seeing mocks that are able to include more distinct, different, unique colors that you don't see used every day. So it's a nice pleasure to see here, even if it is a little bit more subtle, but I still like that. Maybe you want to use a more unique, distinct color, but you don't have a lot of that color in large quantities of different pieces and things. Nothing wrong with just putting a small amount of it on a mock here, and I think it works really well. So lovely to see. And also something else that's lovely to see is just kind of on that note of a color scheme there. You know, I'll get messages from people saying like, oh, what's a good color scheme idea? Or like, oh, I'm using this color. What should I partner it with? Well, like we can see here, Smock is predominantly black in its color scheme here. And black, man, it goes with everything. It goes with everything. It's the same with fashion. It's the same with Bionicle. Black is a great color to use because a lot of things complement it. So if you are kind of stuck on a good color to complement a mock with, be sure to use some black, because pretty much everything goes with it, you know? So nothing wrong with doing that. And hey, black is also a pretty solid color to use just because there's a lot of different pieces in black. So if you kind of want to build a very sort of large frame for the mock, or just not really worry too much about color, you just want to build something, black or gray even is certainly a good kind of go-to color, because there's a lot of different pieces you can play around with that have those specific colors. That's perfect. So yeah, overall a really solid standard Toa design here, but really still a fun way to kind of play around with colors, play around with weapons, and you get a really nice result in the end. So really cool. Let's move on to a mock by my boy Lockie, and this is called Manum Toa of Ice. So I want to say I'm 90% sure I've seen this in person at Brickvention. I remember seeing it's been a while. He posted this in 2016. Or at least the photo was taken in 2016. I might have posted it a bit later. But I swear I've seen this before. But 2016 was a while ago. So hey, having to strain the old memory there to remember if I've seen it in person. But regardless, this is a really, really cool mock. I love the weapon design on this. I kind of wrote in my notes as I was getting ready to record this episode that those awesome trans kind of light blue buzzsaw pieces here that are used for his weapon design here, they're so, I don't know, they're a surprisingly common piece whether it's those larger buzzsaw pieces or there are some sort of smaller buzzsaw pieces as well. They come in a variety of different sets, but I don't really see them being used all that much. And of course, those were used as the shields on the Protector of Ice in Bionicle G2 as well. So, they're pieces that I'm sure you have lying around in whatever color or size. But people don't use buzzsaws that much. You just don't see it. They're kind of a big sort of clunky piece. I can understand why. They're not the easiest thing to use. But look at this mock here. Look how beautiful these weapons look and how much spice on this curry that is this Bionicle mock that those weapons give. I don't know. There's something about it that just really takes this mock to another level, gives it this really unique sort of selling point, this really unique extra sort of detail. I just love it, It's like I said before with the axe or with the fishing rod. Really should have called this episode weapons and Toa, hey. But there's something so distinct and so different about his buzzsaw weapons that really makes this mock stand out, and I love that. I really, really do. So certainly seeing this here, it's just an interesting kind of thing to kind of keep in mind. What sort of pieces do you have lying around that you don't really use all that much, or you don't see people using? Can you find a really distinct, cool use for them, even if it is exactly what they're intended to be used for? Can you find a way to incorporate them on a Bionicle and actually create something really cool and really unique, even though it may not be that unique or different? But not a lot of people do it, so it becomes unique and different. I think that's really cool. I think it's really cool indeed. Especially a really good choice to actually use the Translight Blue versions of these buzzsaws, because, like I said, they come in a variety of different colors. I believe they come in flat silver, and then I believe they also come in light bluish gray. Could have easily used them here, because there is a little bit of light bluish gray already being used on this mock, so it would have worked. But I like the fact that he's really accentuating the fact that this guy is a Tower of Ice, and his buzzsaws are kind of made out of ice to some degree. It's just really cool. It's really cool. So this mock really stands out for a really unique choice of weapons, at least in my opinion. I really like it. Another thing I really like is the choice of color scheme here. The white mixed in with some sand blue. That's a gorgeous color scheme, and I think quite perfect for a Tower of Ice as well. I think those colors definitely represent that element very well. And very similar to the Tower we saw before, including just a little hint of tan, the sand blue here isn't that prominent. And really, the sand blue elements that he's used are those hand connectors, which kind of appear around a few different areas of this mock, really. But the CCBS elements in sand blue, I believe those pieces only came on the Jango Fett Star Wars Ultra Build set, I want to say. Maybe there's another set that they appeared in that I'm not currently thinking of. But regardless, not a hugely common piece. But he hasn't used it in a huge amount on this mock. He's just sort of blocked it in very similar areas on the mock. And the mock is predominantly white in that regard. So, hey, it works well. You can still get that nice pop of a very rare or difficult to use or unique color that can, again, really make your mock shine. And I don't know, using unique colors is always a nice thing. It always just puts a smile on old Ben's face. So that's nice. It's nice to see that. One little final detail that I really enjoy with this mock is the waist design here. So specifically, he's used a droid body piece in sand blue on the torso there, and that piece naturally had some printing on it. I believe that piece came in some of the old Star Wars sets that you could buy back in 2000 and whatever, sort of early 2000s. They had there were the little Star Wars sort of micro scale ships and things. And I believe it was very similar to Marvel Legends action figures, where each one came with a few extra pieces, and if you collected them all, you could build an additional model. So that additional model that you could build was a TIE bomber. So I believe that was one of the pieces that was included on the TIE bomber as sort of one of the cockpit or bombing areas on the TIE bomber. It was a really cool piece. I believe I have one. I don't know where it is. It's somewhere in my collection. But it had that cool printing on it. And I don't know, it kind of reminds me of C-3PO, how C-3PO has that sort of black area with all the exposed wires that he has opened up, and for whatever reason, not armored, I love the aesthetic of C-3PO. I think he's a fantastic character design. I love how he looks. But put some armor on that, man. You're one little blaster shot away from being destroyed, I mean, we kind of see that in Empire Strikes Back anyway. So anyway, it's not a time for Star Wars. It's always a time for Star Wars, but not now. Otherwise, I'll be here 20 hours. Anyway, still, love the inclusion of that more sort of obscure, unique piece there, and I think the printing on it works well because it captures a very similar aesthetic to C-3PO. How he has that kind of exposed wire look. And, of course, Bionicles are biomechanical in that regard. robots, if you will. So I like the fact that he's kind of leaning into some sort of robot aesthetics. Of course, I don't think C-3PO was an inspiration for that element there, but hey, it works. It works really well. So love your work there, Lockie. Let's move on to another mock here. This is by Patrick Biggs, and it's called Tahu Uniter. So I think this mock is gorgeous, and again, I think the color scheme of this mock is just as gorgeous. The inclusion of that sort of, I believe it's azure blue, gold, and red. Man, they look fantastic next to each other. They're really, really striking colors that kind of partnered together, work surprisingly well. Really, really grabs your eye when you see it. It's quite a thing to behold. I really, really like it. It almost sort of has this kind of like Mayan look to it, this sort of almost sort of ancient civilization look. I really like that because I think it really lends itself to the idea of the Uniters from Bionicle G2. This idea of kind of like, I don't know, I can almost sort of seeing an old sort of historic warrior kind of praying to the gods, and then sort of like animals kind of being sent from the gods down and giving the Toa, unique powers. It's kind of just, it's very similar to what the Uniters were, but adding a sort of unique spin to it that kind of relating it back to other parts of history, our history, not Bionicle history, of course, unless the Mayans are a part of the Bionicle history. Who knows? But no, I think that's just a really, really unique way of taking an already existing concept and adding a beautiful new light to it. Some of the people in the comments on Flickr here said the similar things to kind of like an Aztec vibe, Mayan vibe, that sort of stuff. Patrick in the comments actually said that the Aztec vibe was an accident. So, hey, another happy accident, Still though, love the color scheme, love the overall look and the sort of historical elements that it's evoking that I spoke about before. Really, really cool. Something that I just personally really enjoy. I love this wing design too, using a bunch of those Chima wings in that azure blue. And layering it in with all these funky discs and flame elements and stuff. It creates a really distinct, different looking wing design that I think is just gorgeous, personally. And I think is worth noting. It's not something I've seen before, actually. Take a look at the head design here. So it is the typical Tahu Uniter mask with the Uniter Beast sort of head element piece. But you might notice some of these blue fin pieces behind it. So that's actually just forced perspective. I don't think that those blue wing elements are attached because they look quite small and far smaller than they should be. So it almost sort of looks like Patrick's just sort of placed them behind, like quite far behind the mock, and then photographed it so it kind of just looks like they're a part of the head design, which, hey, yes, you could argue that's an illegal technique. It's not officially attached. It's visual trickery, all that sort of stuff. But I think that's really clever. I think it's really creative. What a cool way to achieve something that you maybe just can't achieve no matter how hard you've tried. Just a distinct and interesting way of doing it. I think that's, again, it's not something I've ever seen before, and it kind of blows my mind that I haven't seen something like that before. I personally really love that. So maybe as you're photographing a mock, you want to play with some old kind of classic Hollywood or photography, camera tricks and things, and maybe find some really unique ways of interpreting or photographing a mock. Who knows? Something to at least consider, something to at least have a bit of a think about. I'm sure some people might have mixed opinions on doing stuff like that. I saw some people in the comments that had some mixed opinions on that as well. But you know what? I think it's really cool. I think it's really unique. I think it's a really different way of playing with stuff. And I always love people who play around with things in new and unique ways. So, hey, I think that's pretty new and unique. I like it. I like it a lot. So that's a Tahu Uniter revamp by Patrick Biggs. You've done a fantastic job, good sir. Let me move on now to another mock. This is a submitted mock by good old Pimp Shrimpin. Fantastic name. And this mock is called Saitan Rogue Toa of Steel. So this guy's got some really cool concepts going on as well. And more really cool weapons as well. So this is the Toa episode with a surprise feature of weapons. We take a look at his wrists. He has two of those sort of silver Skrull armor pieces being used there. And in some of these different images, they're being used in some really creative ways. For example, he's attached another one of those Skrull armor pieces, and he kind of has this interesting sort of like skinny kind of thin shield on his arm there, which looks really cool. You could see that being used as some sort of, weapon to some degree, but it also could just be used as a little kind of wrist shield. I love that idea. I also love that in some of these images here, you can also see that Skrull armor piece there is also kind of being used to hold a blade. So it is sort of this holder for weapons and things as well. And I don't know, just in general, I think it's a really unique idea. The fact that you can take some of these weapons out, you can take an additional part of the shield out, and they work as just kind of cool vambrasses, but they also work as an interesting way of kind of stylizing different weapons and things. I love that idea, kind of customizable wrists to give your mock different weapons and approaches and things. I think that's something you yourself, listening to this episode, could certainly play around with, and I think it's just, again, a really unique and different concept. I love it. I think it looks fantastic. This mock also has a really cool gun design as well. Always love a good gun design on a Bionicle mock. It's, LEGO doesn't like including guns that much in their LEGO sets there. And I don't know, Bionicles were and weren't an exception, because you could argue that a bunch of them did kind of have guns, or the blasters and things that they had as well. But actually, building a more sort of accurate styled gun is something that you didn't typically see in sets. And I know it's something that people thoroughly enjoy building. So, hey, here's a really solid gun design that you could take some inspiration from if you're interested in doing so. And otherwise, I think this color scheme on this mock is perfect. The large inclusion of a lot of sort of silver pieces here makes sense for the fact that he is a Tower of Steel, and I think the dark red complements that very nicely. There is the inclusion of this heart light here on his torso. Now, I do not believe that that is officially attached in any way, because I don't see how you could. There's no connection points on that specific torso piece. I imagine that he's either kind of glued that on or got a bit of blue tack, or... I think I discovered the other day that blue tack is an Australian term. Putty? Is that the other thing? I hear people say that sometimes. Putty, some sort of sticky material to put it onto the torso there. I don't believe that's an official connection. But it did remind me of an old mock that I think was in like the second episode of Biss, like all the way back there. We're almost at 200 episodes. This is old times. But what they'd done is that they'd got some of the official Lego magnet pieces, and they'd attach them into like a planet set. And so that way they could kind of build on the outside of specific pieces without it actually having a connection point, but they're just kind of playing around with some magnets, which you could argue is still 100% purist if it's some of those official Lego magnet pieces. So, hey, there's just a little bit of inspiration. If you've got some of the official magnet pieces that Lego's released over time lying around, might be something to kind of play around with, see how you can kind of break the laws of physics and, put a magnet behind a specific piece, put the magnet in front of the piece, and see if you can kind of decorate that other magnet element. So it kind of looks like a piece is just sort of attached where it shouldn't be attached, but with the power of magnetism, it is. I like that a lot. So, yeah, that magnets are not being used here, unless maybe there is some very, very tiny magnet that is somehow attached to that 1x1 rounded tile there. But I don't think so. I imagine that's just super glued on or something like that. But hey, play around with some magnets, because you could achieve some interesting results very similar to this heart light. So that's cool. Let's move on to the final mock in this episode today. It's by Eero Okkonen, and this mock is called Poe Music. Now, I love this. This guy here is a, what's his name? Toa Kai Bri, Toa of Sonics. So, a really, really cool way of playing around with a very unique elemental power of Sonics here. And he's done so, again, in some very, very clever and creative ways, whether it's the fact that he is sort of hooked up to this very, very well-designed amp for this guy, or the fact that he's built this really badass guitar here using some of these Antros kind of claw pieces there, kind of almost making his guitar also double or look a bit more like a sort of battle axe of sorts, which makes his guitar even cooler. Or even the sort of subtle inclusions of Stringer from the Breakout Wave, I believe. He had some of these sort of like speaker elements that kind of just attached onto some CCBS armor, but yeah, they kind of resemble like speakers or other sort of sonic elements, sort of tying back to that theme there. Just little sort of subtle inclusions of the fact that he has, speakers and other sort of sound-related things that are a part of his body. So I love that. A lot of very, very kind of creative and clever ways of demonstrating his elemental power there. And also just some really solid designs from the guitar and the amp there. Another thing that I love is the fact that this guy has a really, really awesome hair design. Obviously just getting a white Miru, Liwa's mask, and decorating it with one of the like kaiju invasion from below beast heads, and giving him this really nice hair design and some awesome sideburns as well, with some wedge plates as well. That looks fantastic, giving your mock a really nice hairdo there. It's cool. It's very cool. So yeah, seriously, I think this is a very, very creative way of representing an element on a Bionicle character, and it just looks really cool, you know? There's nothing wrong with a mock looking just super cool. So I really like that. Some very, very clever and creative stuff going on here, that is for sure. And hey, some really clever and creative stuff going on with all the mocks in today's episode as well. So, if you enjoyed watching today's episode of the Bionicle Inspiration series, and you're like, hey, I'd like to see some of my own mocks featured on the show, check the links in the description below, and also have a look at your screen right now. That is the submission email. If you want to submit your mocks, email me with that email. You can attach some pictures, whatever sort of information, story, or any other stuff that you want to include in that email. That is the best way to do so. Send it through that way. I will add it to the list once I get it, and one day I'll do my best. It'll appear on the show, but of course I got a lot of emails to work through, so your patience is very, very key there, of course. Additionally, as well, in the description below, you can see links to the mocks that you saw in today's episode. You can check out some of the other fantastic stuff that these fantastic builders have made. And while you're there in the description below, you can also check out some of my social media. You can see some of the cool things that I've got going on over on my social media accounts and pages, whether that's Instagram, Facebook, Flickr, all that sort of stuff. I got it going on there, so you can go check that out. All right, thank you very much for listening, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode of the Bionicle Inspiration series. We'll see you next week for another episode. Bye for now, guys. Happy building. See you soon.